Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 easy Ark creatures which are really good for you to tame. But just before we get into it, make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe as it will really help me out. In at number 10 is the Carb Enemies. Now this is a great tame just when you're starting out in Ark, as it is an extremely easy one just requiring a slingshot, and it is an extremely useful one. The Carb Enemies is really great in the early game for doing any kind of underwater exploring, as it is by far a really easy underwater tame to actually get, and is actually a pretty decent swimmer. Although it is pretty slow on land, this thing can definitely pick up the pace when it comes to jumping into the water, and it can be great for gathering things like silica pearls and oil in the early game when you do not have the skills or materials to actually tame up a fully underwater tame like the Megalodon or the Mosasaurus. The Baryonyx is also a very good shout as well if you did want to tame that creature to use as an underwater tame too, as it works extremely effectively as well. In terms of downsides for the Carb Enemies, obviously it is quite slow, and obviously its damage isn't really going to rack up, and its saddle is going to use a little bit of cementing paste, but to be honest, it's not really that bad to get that, as it's only like 6 or 10 or 15 cementing paste. It isn't an extreme amount like you'll see later on in the game, where you'll really want to harvest it in some way from beaver dams or using a Beelzebufo. But you actually would be surprised in how much damage the Carb Enemies can deal. As some smaller creatures, it can definitely do a very good job of killing, and it is okay for fending off things like Dilos, raptors and dodos, but definitely in the damage department, lower your expectations. In at number 9 is the Bulldog, a really crucial iteration to Arboration's map, and definitely a very easy tame and a extremely useful one as well. Although cute on the surface and seemingly completely innocent with no use at all, the Bulldog has an extremely useful use. When its light is activated, it will have the light pet effect, and Reapers and things like Namelesses will be extremely debuffed, and I think Namelesses won't even come out of the ground when your light pet is enabled. So it is definitely a really great creature to have when you're heading into those deep dark depths of Arboration. In at number 8 is the Ther, a tame that has been around in Ark for a while now, but definitely an extremely useful one. The Ther is a tame found in the redwoods of pretty much any map in trees, and you should definitely be careful for them and watch out for them whenever you're in the redwoods, even if you're not trying to tame one, as if these things pounce on you, that could be the end of a very nice Ark trip for you, or a metal run when you're low-lying flying in those redwoods. So definitely be careful and always be on the lookout for these things, especially because these things are very well camouflaged. But once tamed, which can be easily done with a net trap and some darts or a simple trap, these things have the ability to scale up several walls and vertical surfaces, and also have an extremely useful ability for any carnivore to have, which is the all famous bleed ability, which works based on damage percentage instead of just actual damage. So no matter the creature's health, it will still be dealing 25-35% of that creature's health in damage, which is absolutely insane. Sadly, this doesn't all hit in one go, but to be honest, the fact that it only lasts over a 30-second period is still an extremely useful thing to have, as it is still a very quick drain of an enemy's health, and if the damage stat is good anyway and the creature's health is of reasonable level, the Ther will have absolutely no trouble decimating through multiple Ark creatures in seconds, or bosses in minutes, if it could actually go into bosses. In at number 7 is the Beelzebufo. Now overall, my opinion has drastically changed on this thing over the course of my Ark playing, and just my YouTube content making as well, as I would rarely ever use the Beelzebufo for anything, and I pretty much never tamed one. But over time, you the viewers of this channel has persuaded me to actually try out the Beelzebufo, and I can definitely agree this is an extremely useful tame for gathering all of that cementing paste. Yes, you finally heard me say it. I'd probably say beaver dams are still great if you're in the mid-game stages of Ark, but if you can chill out for a Bufo, definitely do. And also think about breeding them as well, as then those insect runs of those insect caves or wherever you farm insects will be extremely easy and efficient, and definitely worth your time, and you'll be able to gather thousands and thousands of cementing paste. Also, the Bufo is a great underwater creature as well, but to be honest, what would you expect from a literal frog? The Bufo has a wealth of abilities and is an extremely useful creature for so many things. So if you've never used one before, I definitely urge you to try one out. And unlike me, you actually may really value these things in the early game Ark stages. In at number 6 is the Anky. Now obviously the Anky is an essential part of every Ark player's progress, unless you're one of those people that just stops at metal tools and doesn't bother to tame the Dodic or the Anky, and both of those creatures could be on that list, as these things, even though a knockout tame requiring a significant amount of tranks due to their damage reduction, these things aren't actually a very difficult tame, as you can tell, they run really slowly. And if you have something like an RG to pick one up and take it to a different area, or if you just pick one up and put it in a trap, or you just lead it to a trap, this can be one of Ark's easiest tames, and you don't even really have to move around, as you can just put it in a trap and then just simply shoot tranks at it, and you'll have yourself a tamed Anky. And once you have one of these things tamed, you will really enjoy it, as these things are by far one of the best creatures out there for getting all of that metal, compared to the Doedicurus, which will get you all of that stone, which is definitely very necessary, but in my opinion metal is an extremely more valuable resource, and it will gather anything that the pick does on any kind of metal or rock or tree or any of those types of resources. The Anky is really a crucial one and not actually very difficult of a tame. In at number 5 is the Deinonychus. Now, comparative to other Ark egg tames, this is actually one of the easiest ones, as the Deinonychus can very easily be your first tame on Valguero. And for good reason, as these things are very easy to actually tame, and if you have just some basic level of Ark experience, you won't really struggle with these things. You just have to be cautious and just wait and get into the right spot and the right nest at the right time, and then you should be able to escape. You'll probably want things like parachutes as well, just so you can quickly escape off of the cliffs, and then the Deinonychuses should at some point lose you. Or you could always do the strategy of just hiding behind a large creature, and then the Deinonychuses will attack that creature, and then they'll aggro together, and then they'll sort it out between themselves, and you can just go and raid that nest. But I would definitely urge you to be careful, but if you are in somewhat Ark skilled, then you will be perfectly fine with this, and even if you are new to the game, just simply watch some kind of tutorial on how to do it. Trust me, you will not struggle with it. It isn't that bad, and after you have got the egg, it is just as simple as using torches, and you don't need to use air conditioners or anything like that. It's just a really simple, not very taxing on the resource tame, which is very good, as it deals a wealth of damage, deals bleedability to bosses, and also can traverse around the map with great speed and great agility, being able to traverse any kind of surface that you may face on any Ark map. In at number 4 is the Pteranodon. Now this is probably your first flyer that you ever flew on in Ark, unless you're one of the lucky ones that did experience another flyer, or you may have experienced something like the Pelagornis if you went for that route. But all of that backchat doesn't mean the Pteranodon is a bad creature whatsoever, and actually I would argue it is one of Ark's best flyers, as it is just so accessible from an early level, and there are barely any other flyers in Ark which actually have this kind of accessibility and speed. Its only real downsides are when it comes to weight and stamina, as it is pretty abysmal in both of those stats, and you will need to level up that weight and that stamina, and I would even urge you to go for a high level even for your first Pteranodon tame, especially if you have tranks, which doesn't really seem very accurate for your first tame of a creature. But a low level Pteranodon stam and weight is just so bad, sometimes it is just even completely unusable. If you're carrying 10 wood on you, no, you're encumbered and overweight. Sometimes it is just so bad it is unusable and is not even worth the tame. In terms of the saddle for the Pteranodon though, it can be a bit of a pain, as that chitin and keratin can be a bit of an annoyance to actually gather up, but if you do find a pack of insects or kill a few carb enemies, you shouldn't be too bad. And at the level that you'll be unlocking the Pteranodon saddle, which is 38, you'll definitely have some sort of Ark experience, and you really won't struggle with it that much. It just may take a bit of time. In terms of the Pteranodon's PvP use, which yes, it does have one, this thing is extremely useful for raiding bases, as its C-spin attack ability, while yes, can get you across the map really fast, is really good for raiding inside bases, as it can quickly deal a lot of damage very fast. In at number 3 is the Reaper. This, like many other Ark creatures, is an Arboration Tame, and is very highly valued among all of the Ark community. I know no one out there that actually hates the Reaper Queen, unless they are talking about the taming method, which apart from on Gen 2, is an absolute nightmare, unless you have a few tricks up your sleeve, like a trap, and you'll probably want a light pet as well, except for when you're doing the exact taming process, as I'm pretty sure you can't have a light pet out when getting impregnated by the Reaper Queen. And yes, I said impregnated and not tamed, as you're not going to go out and knock these things out and then just tame one. Essentially what you do is get the Reaper Queen to a really low health stat, I think it's under 1000 HP, then you go up to it, it will impregnate you, and then you just gather loads and loads of XP to get at 100% effectiveness, and then at some point there'll be a timer, and then that Reaper King baby is going to be born into the world, and it'll probably kill you, so that's why you'll need Reaper pheromone glands, which is another resource that you get, I'm pretty sure, from killing Reapers. So there is a lot of prep work that actually does go into taming a Reaper, but on Gen 2, Raasclark has a really easy tutorial for it, and it can be your first tame, which is why it is actually on this list, as you may think of the Reaper as a really difficult Ark tame, but with this new taming method that Raasclark has discovered and found himself, it is extremely easy. In at number 2 is the Mwing. This is the first Genesis Part 2 creature on the list, and the only one on the list, as the creature in the number 1 spot is not part of the Genesis Part 2 family. Now, what makes the Mwing such a good tame? And also, how easy is it to tame? And obviously, because this is an easy, great Ark Tames list, this thing is relatively easy. The Mwing is a very simple tame, just requiring a net gun or a few simple signposts, and that is all you'll need to trap it, and then just use a few tranks or a club if you feel like doing that, which I wouldn't really recommend, and then you have yourself a Mwing. And this is by far one of Ark's best creatures, and in my opinion, Ark's best travel mount. Just end all, it is just simply the best travel mount. It has so much speed, its stamina drain is near to none, and its weight is pretty decent as well, making it a very top tier travel mount, and it is extremely easy to tame. But it has many other uses as well, like being a great creature for raising up baby creatures, as it is a portable feeding trough. You can also carry baby creatures in its saddle, and it can even steal enemy baby creatures if you're doing a raid in a PvP scenario. And if you're looking for berries, this thing can gather berries too. There's pretty much nothing that the Mwing can't do. And finally, in at number 1 is the Crystal Wyvern. Now you may think Wyverns are an extremely difficult tame. Why am I putting a Crystal Wyvern in the top 10 list? As the Crystal Wyvern is an extremely easy tame compared to the Wyvern. This thing is a passive tame requiring a special kind of crystal found on Crystal Isles, and is by far one of the easiest Ark tames. It pretty much takes no effort at all. You just have to harvest the crystal, then find a Crystal Wyvern. There is a spot on its back where you can stand and then simply sit, and then just passive feed it the crystal, and then you have yourself a Wyvern. And because Wyverns have no saddle, you can access this thing at any level. Obviously you'll need the wooden pick, but that is literally the first level. And sorry, I meant stone pick there, not wooden pick. This is not Minecraft. And if you do go for the Blood Crystal Wyvern, then you have yourself an even better Wyvern, and it isn't even more difficult to tame. It is the exact same taming method for every crystal wyvern out there. And when you tame one, you'll be very, very glad that you did. As compared to the Pteranodon, which is a similar bracket of accessibility to the crystal wyvern, you have yourself a much faster tame. A tame with reasonable stamina, a tame with reasonable weight, a tame with even more damage, even though the Pteranodon's damage isn't that bad, and just overall a much, much better tame, and also a lot more of an intimidating one. The only downside it really does have is wyverns do not have armor, but with all the better features of a wyvern, it is significantly better. Not to mention that this thing can carry a wealth of creatures the Pteranodon can't. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed. Also, in the comments down below, make sure to comment your top 10 creatures that you find really easy to tame and also extremely useful, and I will see you all later.